bass and start the clock in cold water. Most Hudson River bass you see overwinter in the major creeks. They literally stack up. Why? Bass, like the 150 other Hudson fish species, are cold-blooded critters and have a much slower metabolism in cold water. The strong changing currents in the main river are simply too much for them under cold water conditions. So as you see in this cross-section illustration, they locate in deep water areas where the tide goes up and down, but the current sort of zips over their heads. Now that's pretty much restricted to the creeks: Catskill, Esopus, Roundout, and Wappingers, though Skodak Creek and Stockport Bay do hold some. Come the springtime, well, they stay in the creeks until the water temp hits the low 60s, and that's when they begin their annual movement out to their spawning grounds. Oh, the smallmouths start their spawn at a lower temperature. Obviously, their migration starting in the high 50s precedes the largemouth, but that's another story. Now, despite mythology to the contrary, studies have shown that most bass do not spawn in the creeks, but rather in protected spawning areas in the main river. As they start their summertime travels, they disperse throughout the river, and according to radio tracking studies, travel as much as 50 miles and more. After the spawn, they remain in the main river through the summer. Then, as the water temp begins to cool in the fall, they kick off a slow reverse migration, back towards and into the main creeks, stopping along the way at various points and bays. These are holding and feeding areas. By the time the water temperature drops to the low and mid-50s, the majority of the bass have vacated the river and once again taken up winter residence, back in the creeks. So, our American Fish Story Jeopardy answer is, when you fish the Hudson, you have to keep the water temperature in mind as well as the tide. Which brings us back to our pilings in the creeks in the fall, where besides stacks of bass, there's crappie and yellow perch and white perch, huge stripers, immense carp, shiners, darters, sticklebacks, chubs, etc. Fall turns every Hudson Creek into Grand Central Station, and Mike's our conductor. It's the end of November. Air temperature is 35, water temperature 39, and the fish are in the creeks.
Vast majority of the bass and the bait, they'll go other places where there's deep water and very little current, but there aren't very many of those places around.
Which makes locating them easier.
They all stack up with fish. They do it at different times depending on the water temperature and what's going on in the river, but they all winter in here.
The best bait when it's this cold? Live minnows drifted near the bottom. Smoke-colored plastic grubs are a close second. In this case, close enough.
Well, I got something here. It's going to be a largemouth or a smallmouth. He's got a... Yeah, it's a largemouth. Good. It's a nice fish. Gotta be careful with this light line here. Oh, jeez. Took a chance there.
Pretty good fish.
We got about 2.5 pounds.
Well, closer to 2.
See, that's the only problem when you fish with someone. It's never quite as big as you think it is. Console yourself with the fact that when you catch and release, the fish will be bigger next time. When the temperature gets below 40 degrees, we don't react as quickly. That's true, too, for bass. When they first move into the creeks, they go into a feeding frenzy, building up fatty reserves for winter. Crankbaits, spinnerbaits, and big pig and jig combos will provide quantity and quality catches. But when the water temp drops below 40, you have to drop down in line and lure size. 6-pound test line, and since we're fishing deep, 10 to 40 feet down, a 1/4-ounce jig and grub or a small jigging spoon. And you have to slow down your presentation.
Got one. Oh, a crappie. It's interesting the way I got him. I just took the jig just off the bottom, about 4 foot off the bottom, and I just hooked it back and forth. Just twitched it right off the bottom.
But seriously speaking, folks, let's get to the business of catching largemouth bass with small grubs very slowly twitched down the break line.
Right where it starts dropping into 15 or 20 feet of water.
Because we're sitting right now in 17 foot of water, and you can just work it down the drop in.
Yeah.
Now, you'll catch the smallmouth here just occasionally, right?
This time of year, when the water temperature is this cold, you'll never catch smallmouth here. The smallmouth are all relating to the 30 and 40-foot holes. And it's the same type of circumstance where you'll catch them on the drops, but the drops are from 20 to 30 feet.
Okay. You got something?
Yeah, I got one.
You got him out the back of the boat.
Well, he was out just a little bit deeper water.
Oh, nice. Good largemouth.
Yeah, nice fish.
What'd you get him on?
I got him on a sassy grub.
Oh.
A little 2.5-inch sassy grub.
A 2.5 pound. I got to put on a 5-inch sassy grub.
Then you'll get one 5 pounds.
This creek is just full of these things, aren't
Oh, there's thousands of them in here. Probably tens of thousands.
How do you catch 10,000 bass?
One at a time.
And catching them makes this cold and wet day a whole lot enjoyable. And if you drop back into even deeper water...
Ha! This is a smallmouth.
That's a legal fish.
You know, I barely tapped. I felt it. I wasn't even sure I felt anything. Got him on a sassy shad. Looks just the same, just about as big as a smallmouth.
Like I said, it's a whole lot of enjoyable. And with Mike around, it's educational, too. I learned something.
Hey, this is a tag fish.
What? A what?
A tag fish.
What does that mean?
Well, you see that little metal band?
Yeah.
The DEC tags these fish at the tournaments, and then you write down the tag number and tell them where you caught it, and they study the movement and the growth rate of the fish.
They send money?
No, they don't send you any money. Stripers Unlimited will send you money for stripers, but this just helps the DEC tell what the bass fishery is doing.
That's a pretty bass.
Yep, and they'll send you back the history of this fish, where he was caught, on what date, and every time this fish is caught, they record it.
And on that note, we're history. Next stop, a warm fireplace. And a fishing magazine.